Before we start the video, I would like to say thank you guys so much for getting the channel to 200 subscribers. I greatly appreciate it. I would have said it in my last video, but I did have to redo it and do it really quickly and kind of completely forgot about it. So to show my appreciation, I would like to start this video off by telling a joke. Okay. What snapped harder than Thanos' fingers? Gwen Stacy's back. Ha! I bet you didn't see that coming. Alright, now that we started the video on with a positive note, let's get to today's topic. So with the Infinity Saga coming to an end with Endgame, everybody is scrambling to see what the next biggest threat to the MCU is going to be now that Thanos is a combination of dust and blood. And since the beginning of Phase 4, we've had a few villains pop up that have, great potential, right? I mean, you have Agatha Harkness, you have the Celestials, the TVA, Kang the Conqueror, you have Ned, all potentially huge villains in the next few years of the MCU. We also have Galactus on the horizon, Wanda is getting pretty devious. I mean, we have so many to choose from, so how do we know who's going to be the next big bad after the Mad Titan? It's Mephisto! It's not Mephisto, shut up. But I think I have it figured out. The biggest threat in all of Marvel has always been, and still to this day continues to be, the third act. Wait, before you hate me, let me explain what I mean. Hold on. It is to no surprise that Marvel has always had a villain problem. Not that there aren't enough of them, but there aren't enough compelling ones. In my book, and in most of my favorite movies, the villains are more interesting and compelling than the heroes are, yet Marvel treats them in such a strange way. They are introduced usually by some large measure of power showing the severity of the situation for the hero who must face them. They typically are a carbon copy of the hero as far as abilities, just slightly altered, and they are usually just to push the plot along. Now there are a few exceptions, and Marvel does have some interesting villains. Thanos is at the top of that list, and Loki is up there as well, and it seems like Marvel in recent years at least is trying to do a little bit better. But even when Marvel gives you what could be a decent character, they're ruined in the third act. It's like Marvel treats their first act of the film like a clickbait article, like they want you to be interested enough to keep watching the rest of the movie even when it doesn't really get any better from there. So Marvel is moving away from just having a villain problem and more of just a third act problem. Let's look at a few movies for examples just to kind of show off what I mean. The first Iron Man, his villain was just a bigger Iron Man. But the first two acts were showing a lot of characterization and development for Tony and how he evolves through that film, but the third act is just kind of stale. Iron Man 2 was showing us how the government would react to this happening and Tony's backlash at it since he's the only one that he can trust with this technology because of what happened with his company, but then his villains are just a bunch of robot suits and then one suit that has electric whips. Now I understand that the best way for a hero to show how strong they are is to compare them to a similar power set, but pairing a hero with a villain with a different power set gives an organic way for the hero to have to figure out how to beat the villain rather than just who can punch harder or who has the more advanced suit. And yes, there are a lot of really boring, uninteresting, forgettable villains that Marvel has introduced over the years. Malekith from Thor the Dark World is one of them, and by the way, he was like one of the most underutilized characters in all of Marvel because even though I don't care for him that much in the comics, he's still way better in the comics than he was in the freaking movie. Killian is another, Yellow Jacket, Ghost, Yon-Rogg. I had to look up his name, that's how forgettable he was. Even Icarus to some degree, which was a twist, sure, but why not just allow Crow to be the main bad guy of the film? He just is built up in the trailer and through the entire movie for him to show up in the third act of the film and just be killed? Okay. But let's take a look at some examples of stories that had a good start and just took a turn for the Marvel formulaic style that they're so fond of. Thor Ragnarok, one of my favorite Marvel films. Main villain is Hela. Hela, at first, seemed really compelling. I mean, she has a personal connection to Thor and to Asgard. She's got horns. Horns are scary. That could work. She could summon weapons out of nowhere like 1010, except she's actually useful. Cate Blanchett is a great actress, so in theory, they should be set up for success, right? Well, she shows up and destroys Mjolnir, which was an amazing start, I'll give you that, but then it goes downhill pretty quickly. Because she's only really there to give exposition about how Asgard rose to power and then give Thor someone to thunder punch at the end of the movie. Like they don't interact at all until the very end. Also, why does she have to have an undead army under Asgard somewhere? Wouldn't it be more compelling that she made the Asgardians fight for her through like a spell, or just rallying the troops under her new cause to bring Asgard back to the top of the food chain of the realms? It would have been way better for Thor to have to fight against his own people, giving it that much more of an emotional stake than him just fighting like endless waves of nobodies. It would have been basically a civil war of Asgard while Civil War was taking place back on Earth. The half of the movie that was on Sakaar was really well thought out and had interesting characters and choices that had to be made to plan the escape. And as non-threatening as Grandmaster was, he could have stayed the main villain of the movie and the movie be about them escaping Sakaar because Hela was just underutilized despite how promising she looked going into it. So you give us an interesting intro for a villain with a personal connection to the hero, shows incredible power as her first feat on screen, then that gets sidelined for a multi-million-year-old DJ dictator to take the place of the spotlight of the main antagonist. And then they leave and meet up with Hela when they've spent so little time interacting up to this point. Supposedly she dies at the end as well, not confirmed, but supposedly dead. Oh, and is killed by another antagonist of the film, because one is not enough, I suppose. Alright. Let's look at another example. Let's look at Ego. Ego's whole motivation was to spread his seed in more ways than one. He wanted to find an offspring that also had the quote-unquote celestial power so that he could either team up with them and use his planetary STD to infect every world and galaxy, or use that child as a Duracell battery and just pull from their energy and do it anyways. Kurt Russell is a good actor, and I think he is actually really good in this role for the most part. Like, he's charismatic, he's charming, he bounces off the rest of the characters with ease. However, once it gets to the third act, it just kind of starts to get a little wacky. His big reveal about killing Quill's mom, that's a good twist. I like that. But since both him and Quill have the same powers more or less, it becomes another fight between two characters with the same power and is defeated by dumber, smaller group pressing the right button close to his no-no spot. Oh, and he was also put to sleep by this creature who is only beautiful on the inside. So this god with a little g that has lived for thousands of years and is able to form himself to mimic a planet and can make a little facsimile of himself to explore the galaxy and spread his seed to Mother Earth and Mother of Quill is put to sleep by a chick with glowing feelers. I don't know if that speaks more about Mantis or Ego. And of course he dies at the end too. Again, you can't show the villain doing this just from a form, like his little facsimile that he sent off, and then get defeated the way he did. I think Marvel has a hard time writing how to defeat their villains, which takes place in the third act. The hero doesn't have to kill the villain for them to be defeated, because then you will never see those villains again, and they've killed so many characters. Eternals and what they did with Icarus and Crow wasn't great. Crow being able to steal the abilities of the Eternals is a great way for him to evolve through the movie, no pun intended. And as soon as he's able to speak, they kill him so that Icarus can become the bad guy. I know it's supposed to be emotional to see him turn to the bad side, but why not just have Crow kill Icarus for his powers, and then you have a deviant that's able to do the same thing, the same characters die at the end, and Icarus doesn't have to take the turn seemingly out of nowhere. Then Black Widow escaping the Flying Red Room, which has never been spotted by anything Stark or anyone for that matter has ever created. That's strange enough. But having it explode with her in it and bouncing off debris on the way down while fighting not Taskmaster. Black Widow is human, yeah? I know she's like top of the top in training, but Jesus. The ending seemed very Marvel-esque and not quite the same as the on-the-run spy thriller sort of vibe that the rest of the movie kind of had. A lot of people were also upset with the end of Shang-Chi because it was just another big CGI monster fight, but I kind of let that one slide because the movie was just so well written in my book and the characters shined through that ending. I'll leave a link in the description for a full review that I did. But this third act / villain problem is even seen in Disney Plus shows. In WandaVision, you had Sword and Agatha Harkness as the antagonists, and I heard people weren't happy about how it ended in the last few episodes, but I thought it was pretty fine. Yes, it was two magic users just going at it back and forth, but it was somewhat justified because Agatha was wanting to steal Wanda's magic from her, so sure, we'll let that slide as well. Even the misuse of Quicksilver, I'll even let that slide. But you know what I won't let slide? Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You set up such a great premise with a person who is a perfect soldier to fill the shoes of Captain America and carry the mantle, and even go as far as see him corrupted into killing out of rage after taking the serum, just for him to become somewhat of a good guy at the end, so that Carly, frickin' Carly, can be pushed to the front of the antagonist. She was the worst part of the show for me. And Sam was trying so hard to be on her side and see her point of view, where even Steve Rogers, I think, would have a different opinion about her. Oh, and the power broker being Sharon Carter was pretty obvious. Oh, and Zemo was there too. Holy crap, why can't Marvel just have one main antagonist of their films and shows? There has to be more than one every time. Anyways, we all know how I feel about the What If series. They built up this big bad Ultron with the Infinity Stones and just biting Milky Way galaxies like it's a hot pocket, and then he's defeated by a virus that is decades old at this point. So Ultron, which is the pinnacle of modern technology, an advanced artificial intelligence, and has complete freedom of the galaxy to upgrade himself to an infinite scale, is defeated by an 80-year-old flash drive on a stick. Yeah, that's pretty lame. Loki I liked for the most part because Sylvie killed He Who No Longer Remains, and now all the kings are loose. But it was a pretty drawn-out story that started with a character study about Loki and became just a setup to the multiverse. Like, I liked the characters in Loki, but the ending seems somewhat anticlimactic for how it began. So my takeaway from all of this is that Marvel has a trouble with breaking their own formula and just getting out of their own way. It seems that they're kind of inching away from their strange uses of their villains in a way that if it is a carbon copy of their hero, at least it's some sort of emotional stake in the story as well, even though they do keep killing them. So in my mind, the biggest threat to the MCU is and always has been the third act. Marvel has some really compelling villains at their disposal coming up, especially with the purchase of the Fox properties. Magneto, Doctor Doom, Venom is now in there, Galactus, all of these characters have been written hundreds of times from so many different angles, so all Marvel really needs to do going forward is just get out of their own way. Allow a team of writers to give us a new angle on a hero and villain interaction, because you can't just kill Doctor Doom in one movie, or Venom, or Magneto, or Galactus. And I would also appreciate if they would stop showing the villain do some incredible feat at the beginning when they show their power and then just being defeated in some fairly simple way. At least in Thor Ragnarok, Thor knew he couldn't beat Hela, so he had basically Surtur beat her by destroying Asgard. That's a clever way to do it, because despite his power up through that movie, he still lost in the end. So to me, what keeps Marvel films from being great movies and not just great superhero movies is the contents of their third act. It usually becomes very formulaic and separates itself from what came before it. So that's why, in my opinion, the third act is Marvel's biggest threat, because that's the only thing that's holding them back. But those are just my thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you think that Marvel has done a good job with their villains and how the movies have ended so far? Let me know down in the comments below, because I'm actually legitimately curious if I'm in the minority here. Of course, leave a sub to show some love and hit the bell to know when I do upload again. But as always, have a marvelous day.